Last week we talked about the importance, at least as Jesus understood it, the importance of going into those deserted places. Walking last week, this week, and next week through an old book that Henri Nouwen penned years ago, coming off some sermons at a UCC church actually, talking about solitude. And last week you remember that we talked about Jesus getting up while it was still dark and going off to a deserted place to pray. Jesus understood that's the place where he could get clarity, see his mission, get perspective. See himself in terms of the gifts God had given him and the work to be done. So it's interesting today, Mark brings up that the disciples have been out doing something, and they come back to Jesus and they report. So they want Jesus to know, that's their version, according to Mark, of sending in those statistics for the annual report for the denomination. Right, John? I haven't forgotten. And they're giving this report, and Jesus looks at them, and I don't know it was Mark's intent. Mark's always succinct, but I can almost imagine in this narrative that as Jesus is looking at them, he recognizes something that he needs to bring home to them, that teaching moment for disciples. And so as they tell about what they've been doing, he looks at him and he says, "Come away with me to a deserted place." Jesus knows that these disciples need to have that same space and place, the kind of place that has nourished him and allowed him to continue his ministry. And so the crowds have been at Jesus constantly. They make their attempt to go away to the deserted place to find that time. But of course, when the time is ended, the crowds eventually catch up with them. And there's work to be done. There are needs to be met. It's about along this time when the disciples come to Jesus and they say, "Hey, we're out here in the middle of nowhere. From what I hear, the 7-Eleven sold its last hot dog. There's no food for these people. We need to send them back into the city where stuff's still open to get the food they need." Jesus looks at them. I think this is probably also connected to the fact that they've had time away. And Jesus looks at them and says, "Well, you feed them." And the search begins for food. What they find is pretty meager. Fish and the loaves. And, well, you know what happens from there on out. Jesus ends up blessing the fish and the loaves and breaking the food, and the people have their needs met in that deserted place. Jesus, with the capacity to look and care. Bishop Barclay, years and years ago, published the book out of the Matthew context, and he had compassion on them. And I think that that's exactly what we're seeing here. Jesus' capacity to care, to see the need, to respond to the moment, and to be with the people in that. Now, when I use the term care, of course, it's a dangerous kind of word in that it can be used in several kinds of ways. It can be used in a negative way. Like we can say, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of him or her." So you almost think, you have a cousin named Tony Soprano? Or, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." Meaning, I'm going to do my best to negate that person who might get in the way of what's going on. It also can have an apathy connected to it. You want to have some coffee or tea? I don't care. That drives me crazy. I do it to people, but it drives me crazy when somebody does it to me. "What do you want to eat tonight?" "Go out somewhere." "Oh, I don't care." "Okay, then. I'm going to drive to where I can buy 4,000 burgers and relish the grease. See how that works for you." Apathy, which is just a horrible thing. I don't care. But then there's caring, true caring, where you enter into the situation with people. And Jesus had that capacity to enter into the situation with people, to be with them in that moment. You know, the Gothic root for Kara means several things. It means to grieve, to experience sorrow, to cry out with, to lament, if you will. This is the power of caring at its best. It's possible to do good and be absolutely remote from the person you're trying to help. You know, you're just like, oh, I need to check off my scout list, and so I'm going to do this, and that'll get that list checked off. No real care, no real concern. It's just kind of do-gooding on the side. That's not caring in the best sense of the word. Caring is the capacity that we have to engage someone fully. We also sometimes think of caring most often, and this has been the worst part of churches, when churches actually try to do something beyond their walls or even form groups within their walls. There is within the caring mechanism this sense of privilege and power. Well, I'm glad I don't have your problems, but I know you're struggling, so I'll help you. It's kind of that, I'm up here and you're down there, and so I'll try to come down to your level and be there with you in that situation. Not much caring to that. If you perceive that somehow you have different demons than me, that you have no problems and you're going to pretend you have no problems, and you're going to try to help me with my problems, that reach from up there down here comes across as disingenuous. It's also dishonest. Because sometimes we fail to engage because we don't recognize that we are just like that person and we're just like every other person. That we have within us the capacity for incredible joy and incredible pain, for much love and a hate that sometimes rises to the surface. That's the problem with the polarity going on in the conversations across our country. We don't see in each other the very thing that we have within ourselves. We all have that complex sense of being wonderfully positive and extremely negative, incredibly helpful and also harmful. That's what makes caring difficult for us, because we don't see that stuff in ourselves. We have to learn to try to be present with each other in the pain. But if we're going to do that, and this is one of those points that now reminded me about, he uses the term tolerating, that we have to be able to tolerate something, not the other person, but to tolerate something. It's something we clergy struggle with all of our ministry, and some never completely get it. I found all my interns, they had a long way to go with this. And that is, we have to tolerate the fact that sometimes we're sitting with people and we just don't have the answer. We're sitting with people and we can't fix the problem. We're sitting with people and we can't make it go away, and they're looking at us like, why can't you give me the words of wisdom to fix this? We can't quite gather ourselves up to realize that we are powerless in many situations. Now, if you think that's something that's unique to clergy, those of you who are grandparents or parents or family members in general, tell me how that works for you. Where advice gets passed along, easy answers get passed along. But sitting with people, that's the hard stuff. I've said this many times and I will say it again. that when people are talking with me about the hard places, I will always remind them that Job's comforters were perfect sitting on the dung heap with Job. It's only when they opened their mouths to try to give advice that things went wrong. Caring means that we have the capacity to look into the eyes of someone and say, I don't know. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know that there is an answer. But I need for you to know this. I am here with you. And I will not leave you. And I will not run away, no matter how painful this is for both of us. I won't. Until a way forward comes to light. That's caring. That's being with someone when it really matters. Caring is not just about how the individual behaves and exercises that solidarity with the other, but it also comes out in terms of how we as individuals participate in building a caring community. To find ways to bring that same empathy to our ministry. We're being mindful that we only get the power to do this, the hard and uncomfortable stuff, away in those desert places where we gain the wisdom and we gain the sense of the Spirit to know how to respond when. Why is it? I'm always picking on myself first here, but why is it that when people come in our office looking for their bag lunches, or for those of you in the thrift store, coming to the thrift store looking for a bag lunch, it's obviously that they are in hard places. Some of them they had a word for that in Texas. They look like they'd been rode hard and put up wet. And they come into that place, and that and I'm grateful for this because we're the only place on the strip that does this, where we're at least willing to give them nourishment and water and try to provide some hospitality. But we pass the bag along, and it's hard for us to meet their eyes. Because somehow we feel, if we're honest, that they're other than. Why is it that when we leave here and we go to the social hall, and I'm not picking on you, you're the best church I have ever had at doing hospitality, so I need to preface this with that. But now let's be honest, why is it that when we go to the social hall, for many of us, we go in the door, we check, where's there still food left? Good, okay, I need to get in line. But then when we get the food, we're hunting the table where our friends with whom we're most comfortable are sitting. And the visitors are left to find places for themselves. Why is that? Sometimes when I get my water or coffee or whatever and I'm wandering around the room, it's not that I dislike you because I don't always get to your table, but I always want to look for those visitors because I want to try to sit down and find out who they are, because they have a story too, and to be in that moment with them. And so what happens oftentimes is I end up sitting down finally when people are started to leave. But it's because we need as a community to develop that sense of being with the outsider who's come to the inside. And you're good at that. But we can get a lot better at that. At welcoming people, including people, and even listening to their story. It could very well be that that's hard for us because, well, we're kind of full of our own opinions and stuff. We have our own armor that we wear. And, we want to kind of be careful because we don't know who these people are. I was reminded of a story that got told of this college professor who had heard of a Zen master and went seeking wisdom. The Zen master served tea, and you've heard the story, I'm sure, kept pouring the tea, and it was pouring out all over the place. And finally, the professor says, "Wait, stop, it's overflowing." At that point, the Zen master said, "You are full, like the cup, you are full of your own speculations and opinions. How can I teach you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" That's the deserted places. Understanding our empty cup, seeking out the one who can fill the cup in appropriate ways so that our ministry and vision can be expanded. Coming away from that place, we're ready to face the crowds. We're ready to be empathetic. We're ready to hear those stories, to be in that moment with them. But of course, going back to last week, you're not going to get rid of this. This is an ongoing motif. You've got to be willing in community to be vulnerable. And as I said last week, and I'll be saying this indefinitely, if you haven't read anything by Brene Brown or at least heard their TED Talks, you got to go there to find out the power of vulnerability. What it means to open yourself to another. Knowing that you're opening yourself to potential pain and maybe some hurt, but you open yourself so that you're not better than or other than, you're you. You're actually you. And they get a glimpse of who you are. And if the Spirit's moving, you are blessed to get a glimpse of who they are. And that's a blessing. That's holy ground. Taking your shoes off is absolutely appropriate. Well, if you ask the guest first. Being vulnerable. Going away to deserted places. When Jesus blessed the food, we know the story. The multitude was fed, and quite possibly the feeding came from all kinds of sources not known by the disciples or even Jesus at that moment. As people opened themselves to the caring Spirit of Jesus who was there for them, completely loving them, accepting them, gracing them. Well, my 37 minutes, which is the average sermon, is almost up. So we have questions and other questions to ask ourselves. Do we know for sure what our vision is as church? Do we understand what it means to not only invite the stranger in, but to be vulnerable? Do we know how to build a caring community? And do we know how to sit down and be with each other in those tender moments, opening our hearts and our beings with promises that we will not go away? The answers to those questions are always in those deserted places where we get restored and renewed and revitalized. And the power of the Spirit of God pours forth. And we wipe our eyes and we feel something differently. And we see each other anew. Caring. Caring. Isn't that what we're about? Well,